Hey guys and gals, I'm Pal, and just like you, I watched the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct last week, and I was really excited by it. Well, I guess that's just me. Because in the week since, I've seen a tidal wave of vitriol levied towards Nintendo. The criticism is 3 words long. Drop the price. The Mario Kart World Stream, I keep wanting to call it Mario Kart Tour, but that already exists. The Mario Kart World Stream was inundated with thousands of people in chat spamming drop the price. And the reason why, if you are out of the loop, you probably aren't though, is that the game was announced to cost $80 at launch. And that was bundled with a price increase for all the Nintendo games of $10. All Nintendo games will cost $70 now, and with some of the flagship titles, I would imagine Smash Bros will cost $80. Mario Kart will definitely cost $80. That's already confirmed. Maybe the next Zelda will cost $80. And people are mad about that, which, I'm not gonna lie, has both confused and frustrated me. I mean, it clearly frustrated me enough to make me want to make a video. So, let's talk about that. A Reddit user by the name of, by the name of JML Master, among many others, this is easy information to find, made a Nintendo console price chart cataloging their adjusted price to inflation today. And that's not what this video is about. That's what we're going to start with, but I didn't think this told the whole story, because the complaint is with the price of the games, not so much the console. So let's get into that. So I'm not going to go through this graph line by line. Instead, I'm going to point out some noteworthy prices here. The NES started off at $199, which adjusted for inflation today is $590 before tax. But that's obviously an outlier. You can see for the rest of the graph, it drops down to what we're somewhat comfortable with. I included mobile game consoles, and I actually had to add the Game Boy Advance SP. It was not in there originally. But you can see that they level out. The SNES is $491, which is pretty comparable with today, and it was $199 at launch. The N64 was $409, again, roughly comparable. We're going to get to some of the caveats there, because there are a lot of them, and simply talking about the console price doesn't tell nearly the full story that it should, but we'll get to that. So going all the way down to the modern era, you can see that there are some asterisks, some caveats. This is not a video where I just want to say my conclusion. I want to, even if you disagree with my opinion, I would like to add some nuance to the discussion. So even if you don't come away from this agreeing with me, which is fine, that's totally fine, I at least want you to be armed with a little bit more information that might help you come to a new conclusion, or to reinforce your own in a more educated manner. So, down in the Wii U era, the modern era, there are some caveats. It cost $349 at launch, which is $490 today. But there were 2 models of Wii U. There was a white version that not a lot of us are familiar with. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a white Wii U in person, outside of a display case. And that's because it didn't stick around for very long. I had either 4 or 8 gigabytes of internal memory, and the deluxe version, which was the black version, that one cost $400, and I think it was either 4 or 32, or sorry, it was either 16 or 32 gigabytes of internal memory. And that's the one that everybody bought. And with Nintendo trying to fight this misconception that they had instilled, that the Wii U was just a controller, they nixed the white version, and then they dropped the black version, the deluxe version, down to $349. So really, for most of us, if you got a Wii U at launch, it was well over $500 adjusted for inflation. Well over. And that's just something important to note. The Nintendo Switch At launch, it was $299, which is great, but I just wanted to put this here because technically the Switch Lite exists and the OLED exists. I know a lot of other consoles have had alternative versions. I mean, the Wii had like 4 different versions, including a mini, but I just wanted to put that there because a lot of people upgraded to an OLED. A lot of people got a Lite for their child or even for themselves, and then they regretted making that decision because the Joy-Cons broke in a year. I just wanted to put that there as just a little caveat that it's not as cut and dry as simply saying, these are the prices. There's stuff that goes along with that. And we're going to be wrapping around to that point a little bit later. A little bit towards the end. So the Switch 2, as we all know, is $449 or $499 if you are getting Mario Kart 8, not 8, Tour, not Tour, World. Which, $499, you're getting an $80 game. Even if you consider it a $60 game, is fair. That's pretty good. It is digital. That sucks. But now that you can loan out digital games, which is super sweet, not as harmful anymore, unless you really care about selling your games later. But most of us hold on to them. I have all my GameCube games. Okay, but now let's talk about the breadwinner for this video. The reason why I made the video, and that is the games. How do the price of games compare, adjusted for inflation from their original MSRP? Let's start it off with that famous outlier, the NES. NES games cost $40 to $60 at launch, which adjusted for inflation is $118 through $177. That's a lot of money. Now, if you're tabbed out and you think, oh, well, it was an outlier for the console price as well, so it's probably an outlier for the games too. No, it's not. It's actually not, because we go down to the Game Boy, a handheld system, which I would consider, for its time even, to be worse than the Nintendo Switch. I'm not comparing the two in terms of the Switch being a modern console and the Game Boy being ancient. I'm talking about their capabilities. The Switch 2 is a handheld and a home console. The Game Boy isn't. It wasn't even sporting NES graphics at the time. And its games cost, adjusted for inflation, $77 to $102. That's a lot of money for a handheld system. It also cost $231 at launch, which sure is a little bit less than half the price of a modern console. But the games were really expensive. Like, way more expensive than they are today. The SNES, $97 through $219 for a game. And that's a $490 console. It doesn't have the Game Boy's excuse. It was the same price as it is today, and the games were over twice as expensive. Now, you could argue, okay, modern games now have DLC, but in my opinion, the value of DLC for Nintendo or the value of a base game for Nintendo is good. It's not like they're making a game 3/4 of the way and then finishing it with DLC. Very rarely have I felt like that. Most of the time, the DLC has knocked it out of the park. And so, even with DLC, even if all of these games have $40 of DLC, they're cheaper than the games of yesteryear. Virtual Boy, I don't really care about, but it's $83. I am going line by line by this because again, this is my contribution. $83 to $104. The N64 was a $400 console, and its games cost $122 to $162. That's a lot of money. That's so much more expensive than gaming nowadays. And the mathematicians in the comment section are probably starting to see, if you're tabbed out and can't just see this graph, where I'm going with this, because we're going to hit a downward trend very quickly. The Game Boy Color and Advance were both mid 50s to mid high 70s, and it's starting to get cheaper, even compared to the other portables that preceded it. The GameCube cost $50. Its games cost $50 at launch, which is $90 today. more expensive than Mario Kart World. The Game Boy Advance SP cost $40 and is now $69 for its games. The Nintendo DS, this one's surprising to me, $35 in 2004 is $59 today. And again, we're going to really quick start to see what's happening here. The Wii, $50, $79 today. 3DS, $40, $56 today. The Wii U, this is where Nintendo's era of having $60 games started, where all of them were 60, is $83 today. More expensive than Mario Kart Tour. The Switch One, $60 for its games, $78, which is more expensive than, which is the same, about the same price. It's $2 less than Mario Kart World, and $8 more than what the normal Nintendo Switch 2 game will sell for. Why are we complaining? Let's talk about peripherals. Let's talk about added content before I get to my conclusion here, because this is yet another very important nuance that I'd like to bring into the fray, because obviously a lot of us are going to be getting Nintendo Switch Online or maintaining our subscriptions, like I will. And that's an added cost. That's another $20 to $50 for the deluxe. I don't have the deluxe right now, so I don't remember how much it is per year. That's more money, for sure. But let's talk about peripherals. Back in the day, the GameCube launched with one controller. Most of its games were multiplayer games. You had to get more controllers. I believe that GameCube controllers were $30 back then, which is about $60 to $70 today. Or yeah, about $60, mid-50s. You had to get more controllers. You didn't have the benefit of any backwards compatibility with its controllers. You do with the Switch 2. We don't know if Switch 1 Joy-Cons will work. I don't know how you charge them, but we don't know if they'll connect. They probably won't. But the Pro controllers will. The GameCube controller adapter will work. We know that. They've had support for that since the Wii U. Of course it's going to work. So, the price of controllers is yet another price that we don't have to consider. The GameCube also famously has a game that at the time of launch cost $862 MSRP to play 4 players, and that was Four Swords Adventures. Great game. But $862 at the time. I'm not going to throw that in the calculator because we know what it would be. We know what it would be. The Wii U had Skylanders. Granted, probably not a lot of us who are watching this video played Skylanders, but that's an expensive game. There were a lot of peripherals that Nintendo put on us. The Wii had nunchucks and Wiimotes. It had Wii wheels. It had classic controllers, and of course, it had GameCube controllers. All of those were added a price. I would say less in the case of the GameCube controller, but if you want to be able to play a GameCube-esque game, you can't do it with the console or with the controller that launched with the system. You have to go out and get a $40 Wii Classic controller to plug it into your Wiimote, and the Wiimotes chugged through 2 batteries a month. That's another cost. We don't deal with that with the Switch 2. We don't deal with that. We don't deal with the ports. We don't deal with the re-releases. If you wanted to play a GameCube game on the Wii U, you had to get a GameCube controller and a GameCube memory card. Why are we complaining when all of that is condensed down to $20 a year for Nintendo Switch Online, or $50 if you'd like to play GameCube and N64 games. Why are we complaining? It's so much cheaper than it used to be, and you can even see that compared to the Switch 1, games are cheaper on average. Not even half of the games are going to be $80. So why? Why are we complaining? You could argue, okay, but probably a lot of the indie titles will be overpriced as they were on the Switch 1. That's fair. That is a fair criticism. Let's talk about that instead. I've heard other people complain that, well, problem is that games are just getting more expensive, more and more expensive, regardless of the inflation, and even AAA titles are falling flat on their face. We had Concord, we had Cyberpunk. Granted, Cyberpunk has gotten better. I'll give credit where credit's due. Do I need to move for the camera? I do. But Nintendo, when was the last big flop Nintendo had that it wasn't like obvious that it was going to be a lower grade game? Like Princess Peach Showtime, right? I think it was $60. It might have been $50. It might have actually been $50. I don't remember. But it was obvious what we were going to get. There was no false expectation there. When was the last time that we got a false expectation about a Nintendo game? Honestly, I can't remember one. I cannot remember a single game where there has been a disappointment. Or the last game, not a single game. The last game where my expectations were not met. I think the thing that frustrates me the most about this entire discourse is that talking about inflation and the cost of living is equitable to talking about the weather. It feels like I can't live a single day on this earth without someone talking about the economy, about the price of eggs, about how $60 today is not what it was even 5 years ago. We all know this. There's a chart right here. $60 in the Wii U era was $83 today. $78 today. Games have gotten cheaper, and even with this price increase, they're still cheaper. They're still cheaper. Why are we complaining about this to Nintendo? Nintendo is the company whose CEO famously halved his own salary so that they didn't have to lay off a single employee during the Wii U era. Nintendo is the company that, I don't remember this exactly off the top of my head. Here, actually, let's look it up. Let's fact check myself live. Nintendo is the third most sought after employer in Japan. And we're yelling at them. Why? Why are we yelling at them? Let's yell at the people responsible for this price increase. The people placing tariffs on the Nintendo Switch and its games. Let's yell at the people who are cutting social programs, the programs that would help the people most affected by this price increase, and they're putting the profits, the money saved, into their own pockets and the pockets of their donors. People who need it the least. Let's yell at them. How about, instead of blaming the company famous for taking care of its employees, we blame the government that is refusing to take care of us?